What's up, everybody? Welcome to Move the Sticks. DJ Buck with you. Buck, what's happening, man?
Man, not too much, DJ. I got this question that I didn't ask you when we were talking, having our little happy chat before we started. But I wanted to ask you this because so many of the people that listen to the show are either scouts or aspiring scouts. And so I'm just curious about your process. And part of this comes out of I was listening to a podcast and people were kind of reading a report and they were kind of like pointing out certain plays on a player. And I was thinking when I watch tape, the first part of when I watch tape, I have my pen down and I'm just trying to get a feel for what the player is, how he moves, how he does stuff, or whatever. I don't start taking notes. If we were doing like a 4-game thing, I probably don't start taking notes until about the third quarter of the first game. I just kind of want to watch and get a feel for it. And then I make general observations on athleticism and movement and things that flash or whatever. And then I'm trying to see trends. So I'm trying to see like what happens, what shows up a few different times and those things. So I can kind of get an array of like who he is. So for instance, if I'm looking at a pass rusher and I see him dip and rip. Okay, that's one time. Oh, dip and rip. This is his move. Mm-hmm. This is what he does. This is his signature. Okay, I got that. Oh, what's the counter? What does he have problems with? Those things. And then when it comes to like writing the report or getting down to the final thing, right? We you call them one-liners. We talk about like, hey, what's the bullet point that I'm gonna say on TV when they ask me to describe this player in 10 to 15 seconds? Mm-hmm. And so that's always at the bottom of the thing. But I just wanted to know a little bit about like your process when you're watching tape, because you and I differ because you're a multi-pen guy, using multiple colors when it comes to it. I've always just been a one-color guy. So like quickly, like a 2-minute thing of like when you watch tape, like how do you break it down? How do you take notes? How do you kind of figure out what you want to do with it when it comes to evaluating?
I just jotted it down. So I just put 3 questions down, and this is kind of like I like doing everything in kind of the same way you do it. We all have different ways of doing it, but we all have a process. So like my process, and I know guys, and I actually had people that have advised me when I was young, like, hey, don't write anything the first game, just soak it in, and then then start taking notes as you go forward. But the way I look at it is my first thing, the first question I ask is, where is he? So like if I'm watching a receiver, where is he lining up? If I'm watching a defensive lineman, is he in a 5 tech? Is he in a 3 tech? Is he in a shade? Like, is he kicked out? Is he a off the ball linebacker? Is he playing over the slot? So I always start with the first question is, where is he? And I can start taking notes on that from the first play. I just want to know, is he the left corner? Is he, how are they using him? So that's the first question is, where is he? Then that transitions to, what is he? Like, what is he as a player? Mm-hmm. This is how they use him. This is what he does. This is kind of, you get the strengths, weaknesses. How does he move? All that gets wrapped into how competitive he is the effort, all those things. That's all part of the notes that you're taking. So it's, where is he? What is he? And then the last one is, who is he going to be? So like, where is he lined up? What's he doing? And then what's the vision? Like, what do you look forward and what's the vision for this player? And that's where also, I try and write down some names or comps. Like, I always like to say, what if it all goes right? Like if it all goes right for this player, he's going to be doing this in this system and he can be similar to this player. So that's kind of that's a quick version there.
It's such an interesting thing because when I hear people, and I love to like listen to scouts, I love to call other scouts, and I love to like, one of the things I miss about being in the league is like scrimmaging out processes, right? Mm-hmm. And what you learn from other people. I remember as a young scout, people telling me, when you go watch someone live, don't have a notebook, have a voice recorder. So that way your eyes never leave the field. You can see it. You can now it's easy with your phone. You can just say,
dictate it.
Yeah, you can just dictate it, do your little thing, and you never have to like take your eyes off of it. So like the little tips and the little tidbits that we all kind of acquire along the way. So I was just curious about your process. And then the last thing I had, I love hearing the conversation, right, where everyone has like a different grading scale. Mm-hmm. But I think what sometimes can be challenging to the general public is, well, what does your grading scale mean? So right now, when we're in a conversation where people talk about like, oh, I have a first round grade, I'm gonna have a second round grade, or whatever. But you and I have worked in buildings where there's a value to what it means when I say, oh, I put a bottom of the first round grade on someone.
Mm-hmm.
Some people so for instance, let's just use Shedeur Sanders, right?
Yeah.
So some people would say like, hey, I got a bottom of the first round grade, top of the second round grade on him. And people would think that is being dismissive of him as a player. Like, how can you have a second round grade? Well, when you work for a team, everybody defines what that first round grade means. So like if it's a top 10 pick, we're talking about future all-star, future all-pro, perennial pro bowler, maybe a Hall of Fame type player. If it's like a middle of the first round grade, like day one starter, expectation is he will evolve into being a pro bowler. Bottom of the first round, could start day one, might evolve to a starter later in his rookie season, but we expect him to be a long-term starter with Pro Bowl potential. Bottom, top of the second round is something similar like, hey, may not start first year, but we expect him to be a starter after year one or whatever. And I think for us, because everyone has a board, everyone talks about the draft because we all love the draft. But I do think sometimes because of TV, we do people a disservice when we talk about first, second, and third round grade. We don't really tell them what that means when we say like, oh, I see him as a third round player. Like, hey, he's a developmental player. I think by year 2, he'll be heavy in the rotation, maybe start by year 3.
Yeah. And, I was with a team where we looked at it and not with rounds, but it was by, what their roles would be. So you had, like you talked about, an impact Pro Bowl level player, like you were saying. We would have an immediate starter, an eventual starter. So maybe he's not going to start year 1, but he's going to start by year 2. Like I'm saying, he is going to start. I'm planting my flag. There's a potential starter, which usually those guys are like 4th round, like 3rd, 4th round range. Like I think he has the potential to be a starter. Then you have your solid backup players that, like your 6th offensive lineman, your 5th DB, 4th DB. Like he's going to make the team and he's going to be a backup, role player. You have then like you get down below, you have your practice squad type player. And then you get down to the free agents. You're talking about, more roster filler than anything else. But then you also have this other set of, you've got your boomer bust high end guys, which are the developmental guys. You put a D at the end of the grade, and that's the, big time. Like I always think of, to me, like a 6.5 D is the highest developmental grade you can give. And my one of my ultimate like guys that just come right to mind, Vince Young was a 6.5 D when he came out, like way back in the day. Like if he hit, which you saw it early in his career, like, man, he was dynamic and he, but there's risk involved there, a developmental player. And then you have kind of that mid-tier developmental player, like, okay, this guy's really raw, but I think he's got the upside though, that maybe he could develop into a starter, but it's going to require some patience. So that's how we kind of had that conversation. And it's why when you hear people say, oh, there's, I know, like when I interviewed for a job in New England a bazillion years ago, when I was in between spots, and one of the pieces of advice I got from somebody in the building was like, do not mention rounds. Like that'll be a major turnoff. And I was talking with Casario when I was in there, but we didn't use that where I was, so it wasn't a tempting thing there. But they said like they do not like that at all, because they're like, what is a first round player, second round player? I don't care. Does he start? Is he backup? Is he So they almost took offense to it. So people are very beholden to the way that they're trained in this whole thing. Yeah,
and it's funny. I feel like I was blessed enough that like we had round value while also having the thing that you talk about: day one starter, eventual starter, potential starter, developmental prospect. And so it married, like the round value matched up with like whatever their projection is. And the reason why I kind of get to all of this is only because like there was a lot of conversation after Jalen Milroe got invited to the draft, and people were wondering, well, is he going to be a first round player? Like, is someone going to take him in the first round? Why would he go to the draft? They're only taking 15 guys. Why would he be there? And it made me think about like draft, like scouting, grading, putting the thing on, and what it means. And when I think about Jalen Milroe, to me, and I have in my notes, I have Jalen Milroe graded as like a top of the second round player because of the tools. And the reason why I said like, hey, potential starter, eventual starter in that realm, depending upon where he lands. And to me, I just think the draft process and scouting is so unique, particularly when we're not associated with the team, is because there are 32 different teams who have 32 different missions when it comes to how they evaluate and select players. And all it takes is one team to say that Jalen Milroe, he might be our Jalen Hurts type. We can take him, we can craft something for him, we can put him in a position to be successful. And for us, he could be an eventual starter. Whereas another team is like, yeah, we're not going to do any of that. So he doesn't have the same value. It's just a fascinating thing. And I just wanted to have that exchange because I think sometimes as we get close, everyone is in such a hurry to be right about their assessment that sometimes we ignore and overlook the nuance that comes with evaluating players and being able to say, oh, okay, I can see why Cleveland may take this player at this point because for them, he can do X, Y, and Z, whereas somebody else, they don't see him in that light, and they also don't have the scheme that will allow him to be able to be successful in the same way.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's a good call. And I always also want to remind people along these lines is I've talked to a bunch of people over the last week. Like this is the time of year, everybody's kind of getting in meetings. And so everybody's in the office so you can have some conversations with personnel guys and coaches. And one of the things I have learned in this for being on this side of it for 13 years is it's amazing, Buck. The teams that need players at a certain position, man, they feel like they've created some and they can find some. And then you talk to other teams who are set at those positions and they'll tell you those positions stink in this year's draft. It's like it's a line that you've always used. It's a line that you've always used. You never want to go to the grocery store hungry, right?
No, like, because it clouds.
There are some people talking themselves into some stuff this time of year, and it happens all the time.
It clouds your focus, and you begin to believe like the stuff. And that is really why, man, I would encourage like young scouts to have a high standard, like a high standard when it comes to what your ideals are, particularly when we're talking about like whatever, a Pro Bowl player, a first round player or whatever. Like that bar needs to be really high because if it's not high, if it wavers every year, what happens? You end up having an uneven team.
Yeah, a team of exceptions. When you keep making exceptions, you end up with a team of exceptions.
And that's why you have to have a muse. I think you talked about early in your career being able to look at Jonathan Ogden.
Yeah.
And so Jonathan Ogden kind of became the standard by which everybody else that you look for as an offensive lineman was graded. And so you're like, yeah, like he's good, but Jonathan Ogden is like this. So I definitely can't give whatever that top of the market grade is because he's not Jonathan Ogden. So it falls down. And I think that's how people have to look at the things. And that's why it's important to look at pro tape to go at college tape, because you need to see what the best players look like, how they perform, because it then gives you an opportunity to be like, oh yeah, no. He doesn't match that. So I can't give him that. Like this class may be weak there, but let's make sure we understand exactly what we're doing so we don't get disappointed when this player walks in and he can't pass rush like Myles Garrett.
Yeah. No, it's 100% a great point. Buck, I want to get into some other things here. Let's kick things off. This is our lead block presented by T-Mobile for Business. Football needs a network willing to go the extra yard. So do you. Go further with T-Mobile for Business. I teased this with you before we came on, but I wanted to get your thoughts on the power brokers in this draft. And one of the ways you can do that is by going. It's the website. It's a great website, by the way, if you're keeping up with it during the year, which is Tankathon, which kind of keeps you updated on where the order of the picks. And this is who has the most value in terms of the value of their picks. This is a chart they put together. It's off the study from the Harvard Sports Analysis Collective. So looking at total value, the team with the most value is not the team with the first pick. When you look at all their collection of picks, it's actually the Cleveland Browns, number 1. It's the Jacksonville Jaguars, 2. Then it's the Titans at 3. Patriots are 4, both in the draft and in terms of value. And then how about the 5th team, the San Francisco 49ers? Because of some of the trades that they've made, they have a boatload of picks. But I want to start, first of all, Cleveland, we've talked a lot about them being up there with the 2nd overall pick, but I want to get to your Jags. As someone who's on the broadcast there, if I was going to tell you these objectives need to be hit in this draft where they have the 2nd most value in terms of draft capital, what do they need to accomplish in this draft?
Man, that is such a good question. And it's one of the things that as they're flipping regimes, going from Trent Barker to James Gladstone and Liam Cohen, I think they are trying to figure out how to maximize the currency that they have. to change the culture and to change the composition of the team. DJ, I would tell you that the first thing before we even talk about position, I think they want a team that is super competitive, tough-minded, and physical. So if those things are talked about constantly, every player has to exhibit those things regardless of position. I would say from a roster standpoint, in terms of where they need to get better, I would say they need another corner, someone that can line up opposite Tyson Campbell and be a high-level player. I think Jerry Jones is better suited to be a nickel. I think they need another line of scrimmage player that is a trench warrior. I believe they need an inside pass rusher. They may believe that they can get an outside rusher and kick Trayvon Walker down inside in sub packages and get away with that. I would say another weapon on the outside on offense. Brian Thomas Jr. was a revelation. He has been terrific as a first-year player. They are intent on making him the wide receiver one. They have a lot of hopes in a slot receiver, Parker Washington, who's flashed coming out of Penn State last year. He did some things when Christian Kirk was absent, but they still need another guy because as the contract flips for Trevor Lawrence and he begins to make major money, like the $50 million thing kicks in next year, you got to have young, talented people around him on the cheap, relatively speaking. And so they need to find, I think, another playmaker opposite Brian Thomas. So you have a young wide receiver core that can grow on the cheap while the quarterback is commanding major money. And then eventually you may have to make that situation like Cincinnati. And then the last thing that I would say is needed, someone up front on the offensive line, even though they made moves in free agency, but someone that is a tail kicker at the line of scrimmage. Because you can talk about being a rough and tumble team, but if your personnel doesn't match your words or your ethos, it's not going to work out. Because then when you face a bully, you don't have the personnel to attack the bully the way that you have to hit the bully in the mouth.
Yeah, and I look at some of their numbers last year defensively. They were dead last in passing yards per game, dead last in takeaways, 27th in points per game, 28th in sacks. So I just think when Gladstone comes from the Rams, where he saw that young defense transform quickly and get those guys up and running, I mean, to me, it wouldn't shock me at all if they said, look, if we're going to do one thing in this draft, we're going to get deep and talented up front, which a lot of those stats I just read you become a dominant front. That covers up a lot of those weaknesses.
Yeah, I think the other thing is, and we just saw this happen in basketball with the Denver Nuggets firing Mike Malone. Calvin Booth, the general manager, wanted the young guys to get on the field. Mike Malone, the head coach, was more comfortable playing the veterans. In Jacksonville, like the Rams were very comfortable playing young players. And that works because the front office finds the players, but the coaches have to play them. You have to give them opportunities. And so that changes the way that you attack free agency because you don't want to have log jams where you have veterans that aren't quite good enough to be difference makers, but they're good enough to get into rotation. You have to clear the path for the young guys to play. And so as you talk about young, dynamic players, be it in the line of scrimmage or in the secondary, you have to have entryways for those guys to get onto the field. And you have to make sure that you have the patience and the discipline to play them as they work through some of the miscues and mistakes that ultimately happen when you play young guys.
Yeah, one of the things, too, when you look at the Rams, and I need to talk to Les Snead about this in more in depth, but everybody looks at the turnaround they've had in terms of that side of the ball and all the hits that they've had. Their batting average has been extremely high. And, they had guys that tested well and guys that were productive. But if you look at kind of the thread that weaves through that whole group, they drafted a bunch of psychotic competitive guys, like ultra competitive wiring, elite wiring. I'm curious to see if that's going to make its way to Jacksonville.
Yeah, I think the acronym that they've been using has been like DTA or stuff like that, like discipline, toughness, accountability. Like but just making sure like the discipline and the details is there because you got to have that away from the field to be able to do it, meaning you focus, you do all the work that you need to do to prepare. You have the toughness to deal with things physically and mentally. And then just overall accountable, holding everybody accountable to the performance and the standards that you have to meet each and every day. DJ, we work for teams that we talked about the critical factors. Hey, these players, before we even talk about what they do on the field, they have to have these things. They have to be wired the right way. They have to exhibit these things on tape before we can even consider them. When you were in Baltimore, everyone coined the phrase, and people have since told it, you got to play like a Raven.
Yeah.
Like there was a very specific vision for how the players had to perform to be able to come into this locker room and put on the jersey. And if you don't have those traits, like you can't play for them. I think it's really clear that we don't get caught up in like, hey, these are the words, this is what we say we're about, and it doesn't match with the kind of players that you bring into the building.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I wrote that down. DTI, I did like that. Discipline, toughness, and accountable. The one other team there in the top 5 that I wanted to hit you on, because I do think it's kind of a sneaky big year for them. And I want to keep coming back to the Rams, but the Rams flipped it. They flipped the roster. They got younger, and they're in really, really good shape there. Now the 49ers coming off of, I would say just maybe a little lethargic just because of all the success they've had, the long postseason runs. It caught up to them a little bit. Massive exodus in the offseason. They're going to end up paying Brock here pretty soon. Mm-hmm. They have a lot of draft capital, but man, they got a lot they need to accomplish here.
Yeah, they do. You know what's funny? The Niners are in a weird spot, right? They are good, and even though like they had a down year this year, but they were just old enough to begin to show some signs of decline. But those older players were still good enough that you didn't want to move off of them. So it requires some discipline to be able to make some of these hard decisions. And I'll say this. They've been, I would say, in a way, and I know they have some years that haven't been as great, but they've been so good for so long that, DJ, I think sometimes you can have not an arrogance, but you can turn a blind eye to having to make some of the decisions that you need to make to sustain it at a high level. We're seeing in Philadelphia where Howie Roseman and those guys, like, they are not emotionally attached to some of the guys that really helped them win that last Super Bowl. But because they knew they had to stay disciplined in that regard to allow them to continue to build upon what they've established. The Niners have to make sure they get back to that. I feel like they lost a little bit of their way and a little bit of the identity that really made them the team that people did not like playing. Meaning when they were at their best, I felt like they could whip you with waves of defensive linemen. Multiple guys up front that could wear you down. And then on offense, they had a bunch of versatile playmakers that were tough, multi-purpose, dynamic, that they could create explosive plays in so many different ways that it took a lot of the pressure off the quarterback. It wasn't necessarily a quarterback-driven team, even though you had to have the right guy managing it. I don't know if they brought those same kind of players in the last couple of years to sustain what they established a few years ago.
Yeah, well, they got to get it right this year. They have got to get some young pieces. You look at the exodus there: Deebo Samuel, Dre Greenlaw, Hargrave, Hufunga, Ward, corner. The tackle got a ton of money more in free agency. Leonard Floyd's gone. I mean, they've got a lot of guys that have left and not a lot of guys that came in. So they were going to rely on these young guys, which Robert Saleh being back there, I think, is big because teaching, developing is going to be big. Get a lot of young guys are going to get on the field next year. So it's a big year. It's a big draft for the San Francisco 49ers. All right, that's a wrap for the Lead Block presented by T-Mobile for Business. Football needs a network willing to go the extra yard, and so do you. Go further with T-Mobile for Business. All right, Buck. I feel like we have this conversation on a yearly basis because if there's one thing that I've learned about folks that are paying attention to the draft, that there seems to be, for the most part, I would say, a universal criticism is that I think there's a disconnect between what we do on personnel side and then the consumption side that they don't like comparisons. Oh, stop comparing guys. Like everybody's their own person. And I think that's kind of like the new age worldview or whatever, hey, be your own person. Everybody's a snowflake. There's no two things that are the same. Like, yeah, we get it. We know that you're no such thing as perfect, comparisons here, but it's context. And when you've been doing it for a long time, there's value in context and it gives a vision. If you haven't seen a player, and I tell you, this player, if he hits his upside, you're looking at somebody that's got, Fred Warner type tools. So maybe he's not going to be as good as Fred Warner, but you can utilize him in that way. He's got that type of skill set. I think it's incredibly important in the process.
Let's make sure we explain to people the process. So I want everyone to understand that when you're working for a team and we're in meetings, when we're in meetings, video is not necessarily playing. We are doing what we used to do, read reports. So part of the reason why you had to give a comparison is as I'm reading the report and everyone is sitting around, particularly the head coach, because when I was in Carolina, John Fox was there. And John Fox is very visual. And so for me, I knew that if I wanted him to understand a player that I liked, I had to give him a visual of someone who was having success so he could be like, oh, okay, I got it. And so that's where the comparisons started from. We're reading these reports, it's all this verbiage, but finally the coach wants to know, well, who is he going to be? Who is he like? And then you say, hey, coach, he's kind of like such and such on our team. Oh, okay, okay, I can get around that. And then when he goes and looks at the tape, he'll come back and say, oh, hey, you know what? You're right. He is like that, but he has this better or he needs that. But it gives him a starting point of what the player is and what he could be in the league because you've given him a comparison to someone that he knows. And that's why point of reference and experience is so important because you can throw those comparisons out there to help your coaches, your general manager understand who this player is and who he could be at the next level.
No doubt. And again, some of these comparisons, you hear Hall of Fame level players and you go, I'm not saying this guy's a Hall of Famer, but I'm saying this is how he's going to be utilized. These are his strengths. These are the similarities. So I'm going to rip through some of these, Buck, and I just want to get your immediate reaction, and then we'll go to the next ones. You ready?
Yep, let's do it.
All right. Well, I'm going to start right there at the top here. Abdul Carter. And I wrote down a guy that you've seen a lot of. We all have over the years, Von Miller.
Oof, that's a really good one. And it's a really good one because I think people need to go back when we talk about the comparison is Von Miller coming out of Texas A&M and his explosiveness, how bendy he was turning the corner, and that move that he perfected as a pro. He showed flashes of being able to perfect it as a collegian. Abdul Carter also has that. So when I see that, it speaks to the speed, the explosiveness, the bendiness that he displays, but also the ability to turn that speed into power when he needs to take someone right down the middle.
Yeah. So, I mean, that again, that's the lofty praise there, lofty comparison, but that's the style at which he plays. So this was an interesting one. With Travis Hunter, you got to do two. So I'd thrown out different names over the years, and I've settled on Garrett Wilson as my wide receiver comp, who just watching how smooth and easy he moved. But the defensive one is a guy that you liked back in the day, but is someone who was just a prolific ball skills, take it away, and sees the game really, really well. Not the body comparison, but just how they stylistically play the game. Marcus Peters.
Ooh, I did have a thing.
You were a Marcus Peters guy, man.
I had a sweet tooth for Marcus Peters.
Marcus Peters took the ball away a lot, and it wasn't a long run, but
he did take the ball away a lot. He did have a nice run. I mean, he had a couple of Pro Bowls on his thing, whatever, and he was an interception ball hawking magnet. Travis has elite ball hawking skills, and I know when we talk about him, DJ, and that's why like it's funny you talk about like Marcus Peters. Because Marcus Peters did his damage playing off and away from
see everything. Yeah.
I firmly believe that Travis Hunter would be better suited to play in a defense that played zone that allowed him to see the ball, man, so he could get interceptions off tips and overthrows and educated guesses. I like the comparison because this dude is really good. And I know we're at this debate. People talk about him lockdown corner, whatever. I don't know if he's a lockdown corner. I think he's a playmaker on defense more so than a lockdown corner in terms of someone that's going to defend one half the field and no one's going to catch a pass.
I agree with that. All right, we'll go a little rapid fire here. Genty MJD.
Oh, MJD. Why MJD? Give me the MJD.
Same body type, same balance. Like you couldn't get to MJD. I felt like guys couldn't get their arms around MJD when he was running.
They definitely couldn't tackle him.
I feel like Genty's the same guy. Just people that bounce off of him. And then he does have that burst. He has that little burst. Now MJD was a little faster, but he does have that just initial suddenness to pop, burst out, which I saw with MJD.
You know, it's funny, man. When I go back and I look at, because, you know, sometimes you look at the top guys early and you put them to bed. You spend a lot of time on the guys that are below the line. And DJ, he's such a rare combination of everything, right? Strength and power, balanced body control burst, distance to take it to house, competitive stamina where like 9 games with 30 plus carries, that is crazy in today's game. MJD, and I remember watching MJD at UCLA. He gets so mad at me because I was like, I thought you were a little short, didn't love it, but so good and so dynamic for a long time in Jacksonville, then with the Raiders and those things. Look, I think Genty's a star. And we can say that, look, MJD was a star in the league. I think
absolutely was.
I think MJD is I think Ashton Genty has star power written all over him. Right situation, he's going to be terrific.
This one's interesting. Mason Graham. Kyle Williams is the first name that popped in. But then I ended up going with Luis Castillo. You remember him?
Oh, San Diego from Northwestern. Yep. Yes, that's a good call.
And Castillo, I think he might have got popped for a drug test. I think
early.
But he was a good young player in the league, and that defense had Merriman, all those guys back in the day.
Good player, but you know what? The thing about that defense, you talk about Merriman, he was a glue guy down there, but a very talented glue guy on the interior where you had to pay attention to him. To me, Mason Graham is that. When Mason Graham walks in, you won't be impressed with like the physique. You won't be impressed with like the length or whatever. But when you turn on the tape, which is why you have to look at the tape, man, it's hard to find a better quote unquote football player than Mason Graham. He does all that. And Luis Castillo, that's a blast from the past. Like, wow.
So that's why I'm grabbing some blast from the past. I'm grabbing some blast from the past for you.
Yeah.
Jalen Walker, I got this from a D coordinator. We talked about this the other day with Dante Hightower.
Oh, yeah, physical. I mean, you're talking about a grown man
who could play multiple spots.
Play multiple spots, heavy-handed, could pass rush when you needed him to pass rush coming off the edge. But if you need to get into that rock'em sock'em robot game in the box, he could do that. Jalen Walker is that. And to me, Jalen Walker is now the version of linebacker that everyone is looking for. I want the early down linebacker that can be my guy that can run in the box. But then on sub packages, man, I need another guy that can enhance the pass rush. And that's what Dante Hightower could do. And it's definitely what Jalen Walker is able to bring to the table.
All right, I'm going to go grab a couple more here. This one was I did this one at the Combine and then came back to it here. But Will Campbell, Michael Ruse.
Oh, man. Going up to Eastern Washington, watching Michael Ruse, who donated to Red Inferno.
New field now.
Yeah, like he he was so good. He was a small school standout. He was so solid and steady or whatever. And Will Campbell has that. People will talk about the length or whatever. But when you turn on the tape, DJ, he's steady Eddie now. He's productive. You got to grade him on what he's able to do. And he has held his own in a very competitive, and he's held his own for a long time at LSU. Young, stepping into the starting lineup and held his own. Yeah, that's solid.
Will Johnson. I went with Richard Sherman on this one. Someone who's got to play. I like him better playing top down than someone who you're just going to leave alone and press him and not give him any help. I like him being able to see, similar to what we were talking about earlier with Travis Hunter. I think when he can do that, he's smooth. He sees things. He's smart. I was talking to a coach who was tight with Sherman, and I know Richard a little bit, and you've talked to him over the years. But I would love to have this conversation with him because he brought up a great point. He said, if you just put me out there in one-on-ones with just me and one other guy on the field, he said, I probably wouldn't do very good. But he said, you put the number 2 receiver out there and I can see what he's doing, I'll be just fine. Like, because he could see and he knew route combinations and he knew if he got a feel for it. If he's releasing here, I know what this guy's doing based off what that guy's doing. Like, I think Will Johnson, from what I watched, I see some of that similarities to him. I think he's got a good processor. I think he's more the way that it was used to explain to me was like he wins. He's going to win more with his brain than with his engine. Something along those lines. I thought that was interesting.
I believe 100% that's who he is. Really? To me, he's a high IQ corner who needs to play in a defense that really leverages that out. His strengths are his ability to key and diagnose, his ability to play off and understand down distance situation and to make the appropriate play based on the situation and circumstance. To me, you put him in on a team with a veteran defense, like with a lot of guys, like in a perfect world, I would love to see him go to Minnesota and play with Brian Flores, where they ask and allow them guys to play off and see stuff. They're doing all these different exotic pre-snap designs, and then they do it. to me, he's a high IQ player that needs to play in a high IQ defense to really max out what he can bring.
Yeah, so that was kind of an old school one there for you. I'll give you two more here. Let's go Matthew Golden or Brandon Cooks.
Oh, man, another one of my favorites coming out. And very similar, when Brandon Cooks was at Oregon State, it was a tricky evaluation.
He ran low 4.3.
Yeah, because you're trying to figure out, can someone of that stature be the anchor of a passing game? And that's the question that many people are going to have with Matthew Golden. Hey, is he a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2? The speed is real, but can he anchor a passing game? Matthew Golden is super smooth, very fluid. People are talking about the time, and that led to maybe like him kind of surging up the charts. But when you really got to it, I think coaches tell you everything you need to know. Sarkisian and those guys, when it got down to it and when they started needing to have him plays till back half of the year, Matthew Golden became the guy that was featured more so than Isaiah Bond. But the expectation was that Bond was going to be that guy. I can see similarities between Brandon Cooks and Matthew Golden because stature, speed, explosiveness, but also potential role as a pro.
Yeah, and you mentioned that climb. I looked it up. So when I did my first list in January, he was my 24th player. So he ended up right now he's at 16. He'll land somewhere between 16 and 18. So yeah, he moved up a little bit. I wouldn't say that it was, he didn't move up a whole round or anything like that, but he did get a little bit of a pop through how he handled everything. And the more you learn about the kid in terms of where he was training, what he was doing, interviews, all that stuff have all been very, very positive with him. All right, let me give you, want me to finish up with one more here? Last one, Buck?
Mm-hmm.
Let me try and find a good one for you here. Ooh, okay, I got one. Okay, I'm going to do this one instead. Travion Henderson. Jamal Charles.
Ooh, good pool. That's a really good pool. Jamal Charles was so great, man. He was so good at Texas, but then when he got to the league in Kansas City with Andy Reid and how they unlocked him in the screen game and catching passes and doing all that other stuff, big playmaker and had the stamina and the ability to anchor it down. Travion Henderson has that. There could be some questions going in because last year they split the baby, shared the load. I think he got a lot more that he can do than what he displayed at Ohio State. Not a bad call. Man, Jamal Charles, man, I'm
just trying to go random on you because these are the ones that when I was doing these and looking up different body types and different than what my notes were on these guys coming out. Last one. Landon Jackson from Arkansas, who I think we both really like. I'm a Landon Jackson guy. Ziggy Ansah coming out of BYU.
I just was talking about Ziggy Ansah.
Remember how he tested really well. He was rugged, rugged and tough.
Came out of nowhere. Yeah. Hey, Pro Bowl player in Detroit though.
Yeah,
like that's a good one. And Landon it's not always going to be pretty. It's not going to be aesthetically pleasing to the eye, but man, his physicality, his toughness, even the athleticism, explosiveness.
Ran really well.
Yeah, it shows up. And he's not for everybody, much like Ziggy wasn't for everybody doing the evaluation because he went, I think he was 5.
Yeah, he went high.
He went high.
I think that was 2013. That was a terrible draft, if I'm not mistaken. But
it might have been. I do remember I think he played 8 games. I think he was an 8-game starter. And because
he was with Van Noy. I think Van Noy was on that BYU team. Those two guys.
How about BYU having some guys that have come out there through the years?
I know. All right. Thanks for playing along with me there. But it is, I like doing comps. I like looking at guys. I like seeing other guys that they reminded me of. And when these guys get picked, a good bit of them, I'll have a comp on there for you that you can chew on. People get upset about it, but I do think there's value there.
Oh, it's always value. I mean, there's always value in being able to have some of that stuff.
Well, Buck, Pods are in first place. I got started to get excited. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to jinx it, but apparently I jinxed it without jinxing it because within 24 hours, Jackson Merrill's on the 10-day IL. Tatis is a bad shoulder. He's out. Cronenworth's got a back issue. He's out.
You do this.
That's awesome. Great news. News.
You do this every year. You get so excited.
But I didn't say anything this year. I didn't verbalize it this year.
You had the seatbelt on. Like you just,
I tried not to get,
and then boom, it comes out and like you jinx it. Like, come on, man. Just
Tatis's shoulders messed up. We're screwed. But anyways, I'll enjoy it. We enjoyed the first 12 games. That was fun. All right. Anything you want to add before we get out of here, Buck?
No, I mean, it is a nice start for the Pods.
Yeah. Well, see what happens. Hopefully they get healthy. Hope you guys have enjoyed this one. We are getting close. We will have all your needs covered here. I think we've got another pod coming up later this week. We've got a 40 and free agents pod with Rosenthal. That'll be up. That gets dropped in there as well. So be on the lookout for that stuff, and we'll see you next time right here on Move the Sticks.